Hey you bunch of backers, welcome back to another 10 Reasons to Watch. This time we're taking on Grimgar of Fantasy and Ash, which is, you guessed it, another isekai that we love. If you have any other anime you want us to check out, let us know in the comments. Now without further ado, let's get right into the video.
The points given are just our opinion. This video also contains minor spoilers for the anime. You have been warned.
Number 1. The background. The world that a story takes place in is often just as important as any of the characters. How well the world is set up affects everything else about the show, and it's easy to tell when a world is written poorly. But it is much harder to explain when a world is done well. It is just something you feel while watching the show. Well, we think the show does an amazing job with its world. Grimgar feels like a real breathing world with people, animals, and monsters. Now, for our characters, this is a foreign world. They all arrive together with no explanation of how they got there. Whether Truck-kun paid them a visit or not, doesn't really matter. What matters is that they have to survive in this new world, and their only option is to join the volunteer army. They are given the option of classes that you often see in RPG games: priests, thieves, rangers, and so on. And once in a party, they venture out into the world to kill monsters so that they can collect whatever the monster had on them at the time, the so-called drops. It is also not like these monsters are just there to be killed either. They live their own lives, and while it may be different than a human's, they have to make do with their own way of living. They aren't presented as monsters that only want to kill, but just as other beings trying to survive.
Number 2. Character relations. The character development in this anime is one of its best selling points. It's easy to forget that this group has only known each other a matter of weeks. In the first episode, it's mentioned that they are on day 13 and still unable to get any loot from combat, showing just how fresh they all are to not just the world, but each other too. The bonding between the group is very natural and slow, given that this group was essentially formed by who was left after everyone else grouped up. They didn't choose each other, they just kind of happened. Certain members stay quite secluded, and others are rude to each other. But as we progress, we can see improvement, and legitimate friendships begin to blossom as they live, sleep, and fight next to each other, and become more of a team than just a group that were forced together to survive.
Number 3. The art. Something that sets this anime apart from the rest is its art. While other shows may put in huge amounts of money and effort into drawing the most realistic version of Tokyo most of us weebs will ever get to see, Grimgar does things differently, by having these amazing watercolor backgrounds for every scene. As far as we are concerned, most of these deserve to be hung in art galleries. But if they want to use them for this anime instead, we can't blame them for it. When it comes to the design of the characters, they sadly lose the watercolors. But overall, each character has great designs, and when added on top of the backgrounds, everything just feels welcoming. While the character designs don't use watercolors, a lot of the promotional work for this show does. So if you're looking for a cool poster, you won't find much better than this. We like to give a shout out to anime staff when we think they've done amazing work. So huge props to Kazuku Katsui for drawing these amazing backgrounds.
Number 4. Enemies. In an MMO, you expect to start with the typical low tier monsters such as goblins and kobolds. Grimgar is no different, although the difference in Grimgar is that these low tier monsters seem to be somewhat smart and don't exist just to be farmed. Throughout the season, we see just how complex these low tier creatures are. Goblins, having set up their base in a derelict town, are seen patrolling it in small groups to ensure their own safety. They also keep their female population in another fortified area to ensure the future of their race. They also have tactics in combat using vantage points and crossbows to deal with intruders and targeting mages and healers first. There is also a boss goblin that seems capable of organising others and forming strategy plans. He even plays chess. This new type of smart monster is shown again when we move on to the kobolds. They reside in a mine with multiple levels, and just like the goblins, they have a hierarchy. The first floor is home to the outcasted kobolds, and as you move down the floors, we come across a farm with live cattle that has a tripwire bell system that the kobolds react to, and further down is a functioning mine. They also have a leader who we see using tactics when fighting, such as aiming for structures rather than the opponents to block their escape. Now this is only the beginning level of mobs. Imagine if we were to progress to golems or orcs or dragons like a typical MMO would. Now that'd be something to see.
Number 5. Combat. If you and your friends were given swords and told to kill a goblin, I'm sure you would imagine yourselves easily cutting down the stupid goblin. But let's be honest, swords are heavy. And chasing down a goblin with heavy weapons is nearly impossible when you haven't done cardio for months. Most people would be lucky if they don't trip and turn themselves into a kebab. That is pretty much what the first battle is like in Grimgar. Our characters quickly learn that having to kill something with your own hands is a lot more than just cutting them down. When you swing your sword at a goblin, you feel it as it cuts through the flesh and then comes to a jarring stop as it hits the bone. If you aren't mentally prepared to kill your enemy, you will hesitate in front of them. And in the heat of battle, this can be the difference between life and death. We often see in anime that killing is easy, but realistically, it comes with a huge mental burden often overlooked in those shows. Having your characters break down in tears after a brutal close range fight? we believe to be much more realistic and more enjoyable than spamming sword swings as you cut your enemies apart.
Number 6. Skills. The combat progression of our group helps to keep things fresh. In the beginning, we see each member struggling, even in a 6v1 fight against a goblin. With just their natural skill, they couldn't manage. As they each took on board their classes and learnt their first skill, there was a slight increase in their capabilities, albeit a very small one. Their growth seemed very natural, and they didn't just learn these skills and become experts. It took time and training, and each had their own personal struggles as they progressed, such as the team's archer not being any good with a bow, so instead opted to specialise in close range daggers. We watched the group improve from struggling 6v1 to tackling large groups of enemies, and were with them every step of the way, which is a nice change from training montages and time skips with power spikes that some of the other animes have. There are many skills learnt throughout the season, but one of our favourites comes from the Paladin Mogazo with his Rage Cleave, aka Thank You, where he sideswipes an enemy with his huge sword and screams, "Thank you!" Let us know your favourite ability in the comments below.
Number 7. The Tone. Most fantasy or isekai anime tend to go with one of two tones, either a dark, grueling battle against evil or a lighthearted adventure with friends. While Grimgar has its moments with both of these tones, on the whole, we think it prefers the feel of a slice of life. These characters aren't here to defeat the forces of evil and save the world, but neither are they on a fun adventure. This is just their lives now, and they have to make do. Sure, they fight monsters, but it's just so they can put food on the table. Or, more accurately, in a bowl, while they all sit in a circle and talk. Whereas most shows would skip the everyday meal, or being kept awake at night, this anime shows us that these people live a life beyond just killing monsters. It has a much more relaxed and calming way of showing that these are just a group of kids living their lives in a world where they occasionally need to slay monsters. We see them living their lives day to day. We watch as they wash their clothes, make food, go shopping, laugh together, and even fighting. While this may sound boring, it gives the show a nice and warm feeling that you won't find in many other anime, let alone in a genre as oversaturated as isekai.
Number 8. The progression. We've mentioned a few times how natural this anime feels despite it being an isekai, but the general progression is a huge selling point, and the writers did an excellent job in making sure it all seems realistic. The group begins as a very dysfunctional team, given that they don't know each other and they have no combat experience nor world experience. As time goes on and they spend more and more time together, since they literally live together, it slowly becomes more functional. They gain skills and take on enemies in a cautious manner. They make their own maps of places they've ventured, and target sleeping enemies to ensure the safest possible combat, while they all still get into grips with everything. As time goes on, slowly but surely you see them become more and more confident. They still fear some of the higher tier bosses, and they still have arguments, but this is all normal for a group. They aren't the strongest in this world, and they know it. They still approach every fight with caution and planning. The risk to them is real, and we can see that, and it's all thanks to the amazing work of the writers.
Number 9. Simpleness. Have you ever gotten a recommendation for a show, so you look it up only to realize first you need to watch 4 seasons, 3 movies, a spin-off series, 2 books, 7 video games, and 42 volumes of a manga just to understand what's going on? Well, that is not this anime. Currently, there are only 12 episodes out there. And it's not one of those shows that throw characters and moves at you faster than Usain Bolt can run the 100 meters. The show likes to take its time to build each character and their abilities. Much more of a slow burn than a raging fire. While this may be a turnoff for some, we think that the ease at which you can start this show is a great selling point for someone who is just looking for a nice and easy show to start. No need for commitment, just a nice casual enjoyment with no strings attached.
Number 10. The future. The future of Grimgar on our screens is currently unknown. There is no season 2 announced, but that being said, does it need one? Grimgar didn't really leave anything unexplained, and it felt complete when you reached the end. That being said, if a season 2 was to be declared, there are a few things we've seen that could be expanded on, such as the town's bounty board, which we see has a lot more bounties on it. It's mentioned that they can move out of the trainee housing, or better yet, why not move out of the starter town altogether and find out what else this world has to offer. The future of Grimgar as an anime is a mystery, but with no crazy cliffhanger and a nice plot with completion, that's fine by us. That being said, Grimgar is based off a novel, which continues the story, so if you enjoy reading, check that out. But we still think for one season, this anime is still great.
Summary. Grimgar, A Fantasy in Ash is an amazing realistic look at isekai. It is refreshing to see a unique look at a genre that has become one of the most popular types of anime in the last decade. With just over 5 hours of watch time from start to finish, there's no reason not to get stuck in. So if you haven't watched it yet, you definitely should. But what do you think? Is Grimgar as good as we think it is? Let us know in the comments. We have been 2 Baka Talks, thanks for watching, and until next time, Genki!